Okay, coming back onto the results of the poll, then we'll move it on slightly. Mentioned at the top of the video, 88% voted in favour of the introduction of rail seating in football grounds. Full poll results, 17,910 people voted, 15,798 in favour, 902 against, 859 didn't know enough about or wanted to know more, and 351 were undecided. So it was a really surprisingly low amount of people, and as a percentage, which was 5.04, that voted against. Were you surprised at how low that figure was?
Yes. Yes. Firstly, I would like to thank everyone who voted. I'd like to thank yourselves for coming along and calling it and, you know, helping inform people. You know, ahead of that, you know, I was saying to you before we started filming this, you know, we had lots of people who'd come to the private and closed meetings or couldn't make it, who'd contacted us with thoughts and feelings, who were really pleased to be able to watch bits of it back or watch it for the first time and listen to the contributions and help make their mind up. So, you know, it certainly had an impact. Incredibly surprised that many people voted. You know, it is unprecedented as far as we can see for that many people to vote on in a poll like this for supporters. I did expect it to go in favour once I was watching the conversation take place over them 9 months. I didn't think it'd be, you know, nearly 9 in 10. I thought it'd be closer to around 70-75%. I did expect a bit more against. What's really interesting in the numbers is that never changed. Once the vote went live, when you look at all of the data, it stayed just below 90% in favour, and the against always stayed around 5%. It never, like, there was never a day, like first day, you know, everyone who's been to the meeting, like loads voting in favour kind of thing and no one against it. It always stayed consistent, which was quite remarkable, and maybe I think shows that we get a true reflection of people. You know, there hasn't been, or I haven't seen, apart from literally a handful of people on social media saying, you know, they didn't get a chance to vote or didn't know about it. You know, it's as representative as possible, and you know, and anyone who was to say, you know, well, I'm against and I didn't get to vote, you know, we'd happily say that if Liverpool wants to survey, you know, match goers, either members, season ticket holders and stuff like that, you know, we'd welcome that. I think that's probably a step down the line at some point to talk to them about it, because, you know, you do want to make sure you've given everyone an opportunity to have to say, and, you know, it's fairly decisive, that number.
Okay.
Still.
Some of the, obviously we've talked about the 88%. Do you want to talk us through some of the, maybe the more surprising results? I think you mentioned earlier on that equality might have been an issue. I think I'm right in saying that 7 out of 10 women voted in favour of rail seating. Is that something that surprised you, or did you think it was going to go that way during the 9 months?
It didn't surprise me, but we felt it was important to ask because, as I say, nationally the conversation is being shifted onto diversity. Will these areas, you know, be almost young white men, young white British men wanting to go in there? And we didn't, obviously our survey and our voting wasn't to try and establish whether it should be done at Anfield and what control measures you need in place. It was what's people's view. So we asked obviously 5 pertinent questions around in favour, you know, home and away matches, do you stand currently, would you use a rail seating area? But we did say to people, you know, we're going to ask this age question and gender, just so we can try and get a sense of where people are at. It's always troubled me, this idea that people think women go in the matches somehow different. I know a number of women who go to the match who are probably bigger Liverpool supporters and more passionate Liverpool supporters than I am. You know, they like to go, and being a woman doesn't preclude them from the idea of loving to stand up and going absolutely wild. And Dejan Lovren scores at last minute header against Borussia Dortmund. You know what I mean? It's there's been almost this thing perpetuated by football authorities, not by football fans, about how women like to engage in this. So I think it was important. It does show that, you know, these areas can be for everyone. In the voting on age, for example, there were the highest proportion of people who voted were 22 to 34. Now, they're not the highest proportion of people in the ground, I'll tell you that. So it does show something about people wanting to go to the match and the people who want to be part of maybe these sections. But the 35 to 49-year-olds were the second highest. Now, when we then broke down the vote, just to get a sense of where people were at, according to those who might have experienced an old cop. So one of the safety questions people might have said from that vote is, well, the 22 to 34-year-olds or the under-21s, they'll have never experienced a standing cop they don't know what it was like to stand. They're voting based on stuff they've seen on the telly. So when we broke down the vote of anyone aged 35 and over, based on 35 or 23 years ago, the old cop was knocked down. It's feasible, isn't it, to imagine that people will have started maybe going.
Well, I was last game of the cop myself against Norwich. It was the first and only time I've stood up there, and I'm 34.
Yeah, so that's it. We knew it was in and around on the border for people. We knew it would be a fair assumption. We knew there were probably people who would be in the slightly lower category who might have done it, but of maybe being able to experience it, you'd be, 10, 11, 12. You'd get a sense of it. So we broke down the vote according to that, just because it was useful to see if people who've maybe lived through Hillsborough think differently. Not just obviously families, but people who remember 1989, remember seeing it on the telly or were there or knew people who were there. I didn't, but obviously, lots have. And they were overwhelmingly in favour, over 80, I think it was 84, 85% in favour.
So was the vote consistent over all the age groups? Was it roughly 88% if you broke it
we
down?
haven't broken them all down, and we've got to do that, and that's going to come out this week. Just because there's so many, anyone who uses SurveyMonkey knows there's so many ways you can filter the question and tell yourself things. By and large, it appears to have done so on some of the checks we've done so far. It appears to have done so where lots of people have voted. We've got to do a few checks, but we'll release that by answer, by age, by gender, by match going habit, home or away. Because I think the away question is quite a pertinent one that people are saying whether it should ever be in place at Anfield, but it was an important question for us to ask because there is a suggestion from some that they'd like to see it introduced into away ends. So if we were ever to do it at Anfield, people are saying, already, should be the Anfield Road. Well, if we were to do it in the Anfield Road, should we do it in the away section as well and give them the opportunity and say, if Man United are going to build it, should the away fans at Old Trafford get it? Because they stand anyway, make it safer. So we wanted to ask that to get a sense of where our away fans were at on it, and obviously there'd be a lot more work needed in that, but all of those questions weren't just asked for a, we want to almost spy and know how you think, but they are going to be used and looked at to say, like, this is where the sections of our support are strongly in favour, and we need to think then about how we might move this forward or involve their voices in any conversations.